Here's something you probably never think about. Right now, as you're watching this video, there are roughly 5 liters of fluid circulating through your body at high speed, every single second, never stopping, never resting. This fluid is red, warm, thick, and it carries within it the power to save your life or end it. We call it blood. And here's the disturbing part. We don't really understand what it means. Sure, we understand the mechanics. Red blood cells, oxygen transport, hemoglobin, plasma. The circulatory system is one of the most studied biological systems in human history. But blood is more than biology. It's a symbol, a weapon, a currency, a mark of belonging, or a sign of contamination. Blood has started wars, ended dynasties, created hierarchies that still exist today. And the strangest part, the thing that keeps you alive is the same thing humans have feared, worshipped, and weaponized for thousands of years. This is the story of blood, not the medical textbook version, the other version, the one that lives in our collective nightmares, our rituals, our systems of power. Welcome to the uncanny theory of our blood. Let's start with the fundamental paradox. Blood is absolutely necessary for human life. Without it, you die in minutes. Your cells suffocate. Your organs shut down. Game over. But blood is also deeply viscerally threatening. Think about it. When do you see blood? When something has gone terribly wrong. A wound, an injury, a sign that the body's protective barrier, the skin, has been breached. Blood means danger. Blood means vulnerability. Blood means you're dying. This isn't a modern anxiety. This is ancient, evolutionary. Our ancestors who were terrified of blood, who understood that bleeding meant predators, infections, death, they survived. The ones who were casual about blood, they didn't make it long enough to pass on their genes. So we're hardwired to have a complicated relationship with this fluid. It's our life source and our death omen, wrapped in one sticky red package. Now, here's where it gets even stranger. Blood isn't just dangerous because of what it signals, the wound, the trauma. Blood is dangerous because of what it carries. Every single blood-borne pathogen in history, malaria, HIV, hepatitis B and C, Ebola, spreads through this fluid. Blood is the perfect vector for disease. It's warm, nutrient-rich. It travels to every part of your body. If you wanted to design the ideal delivery system for a microscopic killer, you'd invent blood. And here's the kicker. For most of human history, we had no idea this was happening. The invisible threats living in our blood, viruses, bacteria, parasites, were completely unknown. People just knew that sometimes, mysteriously, disease would spread from person to person, through contact, through wounds, through something. They didn't have germ theory, but they had fear, and that fear, it shaped everything. In 1901, an Austrian scientist named Karl Landsteiner discovered something that would change medicine forever: human blood types. Turns out, not all blood is the same. There are different groups, AB, AB, O, and if you mix the wrong types, the recipient's immune system goes haywire. Their blood cells clump together. They can die. For centuries before this discovery, doctors had attempted blood transfusions with mixed results. Some patients survived, many didn't. No one understood why, because blood was hiding factions within itself, secret biological tribes that couldn't coexist. Even within our own species, blood divides us into invisible groups. You might look identical to another person, but your blood could be fundamentally incompatible. One transfusion away from rejection, from death. And then there are the truly rare types. Rojnal blood, sometimes called golden blood, is so rare that fewer than 50 people in the world are known to have it. These people are universal donors for rare blood types, but if they need blood, finding a match is almost impossible. Imagine discovering you're one of those 50 people. You're simultaneously the most valuable blood donor on the planet and the most vulnerable patient. Your blood makes you special, and it makes you deeply, existentially alone. Quick break. If you're finding this deeply unsettling in the best way possible, hit that like button. It tells YouTube that existential biological horror is exactly what people want on a Tuesday afternoon. And subscribe if you want more investigations into the dark systems that shape our world. Now, back to the blood. So we've established that blood is biologically complicated, life-giving and life-threatening, essential and dangerous. But humans, being humans, looked at this duality and thought, how can we make this worse? Enter blood ideology. Throughout history, powerful groups have weaponized the concept of blood to create hierarchies, justify violence, and enforce systems of oppression. Let's start with one of the most insidious examples, limpieza de sangre, purity of blood. In 15th century Spain, after centuries of coexistence between Christians, Muslims, and Jews, the Catholic monarchs decided to purify the kingdom. They forced mass conversions. But conversion wasn't enough. They created laws requiring people to prove they had pure Christian blood, meaning no Jewish or Muslim ancestors for multiple generations. This wasn't about religion anymore. This was about blood lineage. You could be a devout Christian your entire life, but if your great-grandmother was Jewish, you were contaminated, inferior, excluded from positions of power. This ideology spread to the Spanish colonies in the Americas, where it merged with racial hierarchies. The Sistema de Castas, a complex classification system based on blood mixture between Europeans, indigenous peoples, and Africans. Your blood determined your legal rights, your social status, whether you could own property, hold office, or marry freely. Purity of blood wasn't a metaphor, it was law. Fast forward a few centuries. Nazi Germany took the concept of blood purity and industrialized it. The Nuremberg race laws of 1935 legally defined who was Aryan based on bloodline. Jewish blood was declared dangerous, contaminating, subversive. The rhetoric was explicitly biological. Jews weren't just a religious or ethnic group, they were a blood threat to the purity of the German people. This pseudo-scientific obsession with blood purity provided the ideological foundation for genocide. The Holocaust wasn't just murder, it was framed as biological self-defense, purification through elimination. And here's what should terrify you. These weren't fringe beliefs. These were mainstream, state-enforced ideologies, supported by scientists, doctors, and intellectuals. Blood became the ultimate tool of dehumanization. Because blood is invisible. You can't see it. You can't argue with it. Someone in power simply declares that your blood is wrong, and suddenly, you're not fully human anymore. And this pattern, using blood as a weapon of exclusion, didn't end in 1945. Not even close. But we'll get to that. Now let's talk about blood in war. Blood oaths, blood brothers, blood sacrifice. Across virtually every culture, blood has been used to seal pacts, create bonds, and sanctify violence. Viking warriors allegedly drank the blood of fallen enemies to absorb their strength. Aztec priests performed mass blood sacrifices, believing the gods required human blood to sustain the cosmos. In ancient Rome, gladiators' blood was considered medicinal, powerful, and spectators would rush to collect it. Why blood? Why not water, wine, or oil? Because blood is real. You can't fake blood sacrifice. You can't pretend. When you spill blood, yours or someone else's, you're making an irreversible statement. Blood rituals create psychological bonds through shared trauma and taboo breaking. You've crossed a line together. You're bound by what you've done, by what you've witnessed. Modern militaries don't perform ritual blood sacrifices anymore, but the language remains. We talk about blood and soil. Soldiers are blood brothers. We bleed for our country. The symbolism persists because it works. Blood rhetoric bypasses rational thought and strikes directly at our primal psychology. The contaminated blood scandal. Now, let me tell you about one of the darkest medical scandals in modern history. One that perfectly illustrates how the unseen threat of blood can devastate thousands of lives. In the 1970s and 80s, people with hemophilia, a genetic disorder that prevents blood from clotting, required regular infusions of clotting factor, a blood product derived from donated plasma. To make this product, pharmaceutical companies pooled plasma from thousands of donors. Efficient, cost-effective. But here's the problem. If even one donor was infected with HIV or hepatitis, the entire batch became contaminated. And in the early days of the AIDS epidemic, blood wasn't being screened. Thousands of hemophiliacs, many of them children, were infected with HIV through their medication. The very treatment keeping them alive was killing them. In the UK alone, around 3,000 people died. Thousands more were infected with hepatitis C. The scandal gets worse. Evidence suggests that some companies knew their products were contaminated and continued distributing them, particularly to less important markets. The blood of hemophiliacs was deemed less valuable than corporate profits. A public inquiry in 2024, decades later, finally acknowledged the full scope of the tragedy. This is the unseen threat made horrifyingly visible. Blood, which should have been medicine, became a vector for death. Trust in the medical system shattered, lives destroyed, and the psychological trauma. Imagine being a parent in 1985, watching your child die from a disease transmitted through the medication that was supposed to save them. That's not just medical malpractice, that's blood betrayal on a systemic level. If you've made it this far, you're clearly comfortable with disturbing truths, which means you're exactly the kind of person who should subscribe to this channel. We do deep dives into history's darkest systems every week. Also, drop a comment. What's the most unsettling thing you've learned about blood? I read every single one. So what have we learned? Blood is a paradox. It sustains us and threatens us. It unites us. We all bleed red, and it divides us into invisible factions, both biological and ideological. But here's the deepest, most unsettling truth. The way we think about blood reveals how we think about power, purity, and belonging. When a society becomes obsessed with pure blood, what they're really obsessed with is control. Control over who belongs, who has power, who gets to be fully human. Blood purity rhetoric isn't about biology, it's about creating an unchallengeable hierarchy, because you can't change your blood. You can't argue with your ancestry. Your blood is fixed, permanent, which makes it the perfect tool for oppression and the fear of contaminated blood. That's not entirely irrational. Blood can carry disease, but societies have consistently amplified that fear beyond reason, using it to justify exclusion, violence, and dehumanization. The AIDS crisis is a perfect example. The actual risk of HIV transmission through casual contact was near zero, but the panic was enormous. People with AIDS were treated as walking biohazards, untouchable, modern lepers. The medical reality didn't matter. The symbolism of contaminated blood overpowered the science. Here's what I want you to understand. Blood is the most powerful biological symbol in human history, precisely because it lives at the intersection of life and death, self and other purity and contamination. We are, all of us, deeply uncomfortable with blood. We need it, but we fear it. We worship it in rituals, but we're disgusted by it in reality. And that discomfort, that primal unease, makes blood the perfect vehicle for psychological manipulation. Want to start a war? Talk about defending your homeland's blood and soil. Want to create a racial hierarchy? Declare certain bloodlines superior. Want to scapegoat a minority? Call them a contamination in the nation's bloodstream. The language of blood bypasses our rational minds. It speaks directly to ancient evolutionary fears. And the most disturbing part, it works every single time. So what do we do with this information? First, recognize blood rhetoric for what it is. Anytime you hear someone talking about pure blood, bad blood, poisoned bloodlines, or protecting the blood of the nation, understand that you're not hearing science. You're hearing an ancient psychological weapon being deployed. Blood purity is always, always a smokescreen for power and control. Second, understand the power of invisible threats, the things we can't see. Viruses, genetic differences, hereditary contamination are far more frightening than visible dangers, because we can't fight what we can't see. Demagogues and fearmongers know this. They weaponize invisible threats, especially those related to blood and biology, because they trigger our deepest survival instincts. Third, remember the paradox. Blood is life. Blood is death. Both are true simultaneously. Anyone who tells you blood is only pure or only contaminated is lying. Blood is complicated, messy, human, just like us. In 1901, Karl Landsteiner discovered blood types and won a Nobel Prize for saving countless lives through safe transfusions. In 1935, the Nazis used blood classification to justify genocide. Same science, same blood, completely opposite outcomes, because blood, ultimately, is just a fluid, cells suspended in plasma, carrying oxygen and nutrients through the body. It's humans who make it sacred or profane, pure or contaminated, a source of life or a mark of death. The uncanny theory of our blood is this: the most powerful substance in your body has no inherent meaning. We give it meaning. We project our fears, our hierarchies, our need for control onto this red fluid, and in doing so, we reveal far more about ourselves than we do about blood. The question isn't what is blood? The question is what do we make of blood? And the answer, throughout history, has been both miraculous and monstrous. Your blood is keeping you alive right now, every second, never stopping. But remember, it's also the same substance that has been used to justify some of the darkest chapters in human history. That's the paradox we live with. That's the uncanny theory of our blood. If this video made you think differently about what's literally coursing through your veins right now, do me a favor, share it with someone who enjoys having their worldview gently dismantled by historical facts. Subscribe for more psychological autopsies of the systems that shape our world. And remember, like and subscribe. Not because I asked nicely, but because algorithms feed on engagement like ancient gods fed on blood sacrifice. See you in the next investigation.